So what I've done now is I've completed the lower eyelid on the left side, so it works just like the upper one does and like the one on the right hand side does, and it's just basically the exact opposite of this one. I've also taken the liberty to add a nose control, and this is really straightforward. It's just connected directly up, and it handles the very end of the nose, the tip of the nose, so we can kind of snub the nose at you if we like, or stretch it or compress it if it gets hit, or wobble it sideways, whatever we like. The next thing we need to do is we need to connect up the jaw. Right now the jaw, when it rotates, you'll notice that it's just directly pulling on some of the point helpers that are parented directly to it. And we're not getting any nice fall-offs around the mouth or necessarily in the face at all. You know, some move 100%, other ones are moving 0% with it. So we need to get a nice fall-off between some of the joints and everything to make it feel nice and fluid and smooth. So what we're going to do to get around that is just do a bit of rigging. The other thing we need first is we need a control for the jaw. And since all of the other controls pretty much on the face are handled through positions, what we're going to do is we're going to use a position one as well instead of a rotation control. And I'll just keep it you know, somewhat uniform for the animator to work with. So I want to drop control down here, kind of aligned up to the jaw a little bit. And they'll be able to grab and move this to be able to rotate the jaw. It'll just feel a little more natural, so they don't have to suddenly shift to rotation when, you know, 99% of the controls so far have all been based on position. What we're going to do is we're going to take the jawbone that's already zeroed out and just add the zero controllers to it. And this time we can't work on a quaternion rotation because we're connecting up to positions. So we're going to have to use the actual float values. And the Z rotation, which is up and down, is going to get connected to the Y position up and down of the control. I want to say connect. And you can see that it just moves way too fast. The other problem is because I copied this lower control, this point helper is parented up to the jaw itself. So let's actually reparent this up to the top here. I think I missed it. There we go. So that it doesn't have that extra movement, and you can still see that the jawbone moves much, much faster. This is partly due to the fact that deg to rad should be used. Degrees to radians is a conversion. Rotations are handled actually in radians, not in the angles that we're used to, the degrees. So if you connect up to things, sometimes they move way too fast than what you'd actually expect. So what you need to do is you need to put deg to rad in there, and it'll convert it to you know, the known value. So if you're connecting a rotation to a spinner, you'd have to do it. In this case, it doesn't really matter. You know, all we can do is just throw multipliers on it. We're actually setting up you know, the rotation of a job to position. We could call it degrees if we wanted. I'm not sure it's going to make any difference. We just need to set it up so it feels like it's working fairly well. Let's try times 0.1. The animators don't really follow any given value. They're not going to look at a jaw bone and say, I want to rotate it 15 degrees, therefore move this 15 degrees. Animators tend to do things by eye and not by specifics like that. So actually multiplying it by times 0.1 looks like it nails it pretty much right on. Then we need to get side to side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the y-axis on this, which is up and down. We're going to connect it to the x here. And let's try the same thing, times 0.1. And we may have to invert it if it goes backwards. But it doesn't, so it actually goes the right way. So you can see that it's actually feels pretty good. It almost feels like, again, it's stuck to the chin. And it moves to it, so that control is pretty nice too. It just feels like it's stuck right on there, and so now that handles the jawbone like we'd expect. So now to set it up so that we've got a better rotation on some of these, we've got some nice fall-offs. What we can do is really simple. Is we just need to make some point helpers and constrain them between these two objects, basically the object that isn't rotating and the object that is rotating, and then parent the controls or the point helpers, whichever they might be, instead of to the jawbone, but to point helpers that are weighted between these two. If we stick one in and weight it 50-50, we'll get rotations halfway. I have the feeling we're probably going to need like at least 2 layers of rotations out of this to get it to work right. So what I'm going to do then is create a point helper, and let's turn off the cross on this one, and let's make it a bit bigger. Maybe if we set it to about a 3 or something for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up to that orientationally and positionally. And I'm just going to parent it into the control at the top. And now we just need to set up the constraints. So so the orientation constraint, constrain it to the top first, and then I'll constrain it to the bottom, to the jaw. And now what we'll get is this nice halfway rotation. So if I grab the control, you can see it's rotating half as much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up 2 levels of this. Let's make this one rotate more, stick basically more with the base of the head, so more with the top one. So let's say this 66.5 and this one 33.5. And then exactly the same thing. I'm just going to make a copy of this. And let's just increase this in size a little bit. So let's say 3.5. I'll just align it positionally back in there again. And then let's invert those numbers. The top one will be 33.5, and this will be 66.5. So now what we've got is we've got essentially 4 options. We have the original point helper, which is not rotating at all. We have the original jawbone, which is rotating 100%. And then we have 2 options in between that's rotating in between. I think I'll just make this one a bit smaller and make it a bit more obvious. So maybe 2.5, 2.75, and then we can get at them a bit easier, nice and even. So what we're looking at is no rotation, only 30% rotation, 66% rotation, and 100% rotation. So we've got several different levels. So what we need to do now is just check and see which ones we want to rotate where. Kind of thinking that this whole row here should actually be rotating only partially with it. So let's take and find the root of all these. So right now, if we actually go down to our and check and see what the children are, we can see what the children objects are of this system. And it doesn't look like it's actually, I think it's that one's actually the child here. There it is. That's the should have been the child of this one. Oh, it's the child of the jawbone, of course. So if I had the wrong one picked. So what I've done is I've picked the jawbone. I want to find all its children, push page down, and it'll highlight all of its children. So I know that this one, instead of connected up to the jawbone, let's parent this up to the one that's only rotating a little bit. And let's go get the other one on the other side. So it's the small yellow one. And let's parent those to this one here. And that will already give us the corners of the mouth not moving as much. And opening the mouth some and pulling on it. So I'm thinking that we should probably have all of these doing exactly the same thing. So I'm going to go in and grab the center ones here. And I'm going to go in and parent those in here. And of course we go and do it on the other side as well. And we parent those in to this one. So those will spread out, not rotate as much as the lower jaw will now. So all we need to do now is just figure out which ones we want to have parented to which, and of course we could weight it a little bit more or a little bit less. We could change the weighting on the constraints in different places to try and get a little bit different solution out of it. I'm going to try going right down to here with the next one, the one that's rotating. Oops, not that one there, but that one there. And I want to see how this looks. And it's a matter of fiddling around. Again, this is going to be different with every single character that you work on. And I'm going to go to the outside one with this and see how that works. And it's not getting a nicer spread out of everything. So you can see that the very center one here is moving 100% with it. I'm not sure that I quite like the way that some of these are moving. I might need to move a bit more with it. It might be a bit too even now for the mouth open. But what I think the best thing would do at this point would be to actually go in and weight the character up and make sure that it's actually looking the way we'd want for the skinning, and then we can go back and we can start tweaking some of the way it reacts. And one of the nice things about this is you can actually see that we're getting some sort of pulling already here on the bottom to give it to push the bottom out and make it feel like some of this fatty tissue here is actually expanding and whatnot. So that's kind of cool. It looks pretty good. It looks like it'll do what we want. It looks like getting some nice motion. Now, this one here too looks like it probably needs to be parented in directly for the jaw, because really that should be a jaw movement still right there. But I'm going to connect it up to that one like the rest of that row is, and see how that works. And it seems to move fairly well. Now these ones I haven't, and that's going to be an interesting choice as to what we do with those. What we might want to do with those is, because this character has very little room here, and then any movement that happened down in the neck area would actually affect these. And you know, if you pushed his head down, it would sort of collapse some and move some of these. We might want to actually go in and do something with these controls for the very bottom of the sort of jaw area. I mean, you might want to actually parent those into something that is in the rig further. Maybe even the neck joint. We'd have to we'll have to play around with it and see what it'll do for us. But that could be actually a better choice, because what you'd get is as the character's head moves, it'll actually stick that neck down a little bit more, so you can see it's pulling on it and helping it pull it out a little bit. And again, we could even base some of the others. We could actually base some of the rotations of these on that neck joint as well if we wanted to, and play around with that. So as the head tilts back, it helps stretch some of the jowls out a bit better. Maybe those bottom three stretched out a bit more. Or we could just simply connect these values up to the rotation of this object to get it to drive properly. But you can see it's actually sort of helping the stretch of the neck out and the collapsing of it. And with the collapsing of it, it'll help, because if it helps collapse it underneath here, we'll actually get a little bit more range of motion before we'll start getting crushing happening. Now we have to be careful that we're not getting what we're getting right now. As if you can see, we're actually, because of the weighting of the character, it's pulling on it just far too much. But that's part of the tweak period, to sit there and play with this sort of thing and get the weights correct. So I'm going to go and finish the weighting, complete the weighting off. The weighting is done just as it was done in DVD3, and the way we've looked at it already, just going in and painting weights and playing with it back and forth and trying to get some of the weights right. And with every character, that's going to be different. And it is really just more of a trial and error thing to see if you can get the right sort of feel going and the right amount of weighting to any given joint. So this character is actually complete with the rig. We'd have to set up pupils. Again, we can do it the way we've done it in the past on the last rig. And I'm just going to go and have a look at this without the everything showing. hide the helpers and hide the bones. And here's our completed rig at this level. The other thing I need to do, and I just completely forgot, was that we need to put the layer of controls in there on each point helper. So that'll actually happen next, and then we can come back and we can have a look at what I've done with the completed skinning on it. So I'll go and we'll do the script for all the controls, all the finite level controls. But this is now really nice and simple for the animators to grab a hold of. Just a few control points tacked around the character's face. I'll lock out some axes so they only work on certain axes. Like this one shouldn't be able to be pulled out on the Y. Maybe we could actually have that, because you can actually jut your jaw out. So we could actually hook up the position of the jaw to pull out a little bit based on the pulling of this out, as well as pushing it in, or we could stretch the joint in some, have it a typical stretchy joint, which really isn't any different than just sort of moving it out, moving the end joint out. So we can actually have quite a few things going on, to make it a finer control level of everything. Quite happy the way this has turned out. It's got a really nice flow to it on this face. This face lends well to this sort of setup, because it's sort of very soft, has a lot of fatty tissue on it to begin with, and really needs to have lots of expression. So I have the feeling that we'll be able to get lots of expression out of this character, and be able to get a really, really nice look to it. Before I start the addition of the fine level controls, just wanted to show you where I was at with the skinning. I've done a fair amount of little tweaks to it just to get little things working properly. One of them was the actual jaw. I've actually set that up so it all slides out now and can be slid in and out. That was actually relatively simple to do. All I've done is, you can see that the at this end of the jaw, the actual point helpers that we put in there for sort of spreading out the rotation of the jaw, I've wired in the X, which points down the length of this, into the Z out of this control, and same with the bone, and done it to just different values. So now I can pull the whole thing out, sort of played with the values, and that got me a nice setup for being able to get the jaw to go in and out. So that works quite well. I've also worked a fair amount on the skinning, playing with that a lot, and getting some nicer skinning going. So I'm getting some, pulling in the right spots that shouldn't have been moving before aren't moving now that I've locked down. The brows aren't pulling on the eyelids, and you can see that it's getting a nice, quite a nice result there. Just hide off everything, and getting the results from the eyelids that we're looking for, pretty much. Corners of the mouth. A couple other changes I've made just really quickly on it. I noticed that when I was pulling up the this control straight up and down, or sorry, down on this one, is that eventually I was running into the teeth, now that I have the teeth unhidden. So another little change I made is that I took this control here, this point helper, wired the Z out onto the Y down, so you can see when it starts going down, it starts pulling it out, and that keeps it out over top of the teeth. And when I go in, I stop pushing it in, and it just stays where it is and folds up. I've even done the same with these two on either side. It's the same thing when you pull this down. These ones get pulled out just a little bit, I think about a 0.3. And I've done the same thing on the bottom down here, where when you pull this up, now I can show it probably better in the side view of the character. You can see that the bottom lip actually starts getting pushed out to make sure it clears the teeth, but it doesn't go in when I go down, and so it automatically is trying to avoid them. Probably could do the same thing in a couple other spots. You'll see when you grab the corner of the mouth and pull it up and down, you'll see you start to run into the teeth. You can see the geo starting to show up. It doesn't, it isn't really nice, but you can easily just pull out the controls. But if you wanted to do a little bit of automation to it, you could get some of the intermediary points to automatically pull out a little bit when this goes up, so it avoids that sort of thing. So you could go around and sort of tweak that. This is kind of really the same sort of level of tweaking. And again, sorry, you can see it as I go down here. You can see the upper one going in. So it's going to run into it as well when I go in. So again, we could have it automatically push out a little bit. This is the same level of tweaking as just like when we were dealing with morph targets and having to create corrective targets for certain poses so that we didn't run into the teeth. And this is the same thing. We just need to go around and hook up some more wire parameters. That was done relatively easily. What I did was, I'll just show you this one here into our navigation track view that I've set up. What I did is in one of the new slots, one of the available slots, I put in a position XYZ controller so I could just wire the Z axis out to the Z axis out on the control in this case, and just put in another if statement, basically saying if the Y is in this case less than, so it's going down, then I need the negative value of that to go out in the positive Z. So pump in the negative Y axis times 0.5 to slow this down a little bit so it doesn't go as fast, and then 0 on the way up. So you can just go around and just set that up a little bit, just tweak it up to make it work. This is again one of those things that just has to happen on a rig like this. If you're going to get it to work properly and nicely, you need the time to actually set it up. You know, it just takes tweaking and playing to get it all working exactly the way you expect it to. Right now it's actually working quite nice. So next step, we're going to go in and put in that finite control. We're going to write a script to do that.